The ballroom was a forgotten relic, its chandeliers draped in cobwebs, their crystals dulled by decades of neglect. Moonlight filtered through cracked stained glass windows, casting fractured rainbows across the warped wooden floor. The air smelled of dust and faded perfume, a ghost of grandeur from an era when this estate hosted galas that echoed into dawn. Now, it was just another job for Elena, the cleaning lady, who pushed her mop through the grime with the rhythm of someone who'd long since stopped dreaming of anything beyond a paycheck. Her worn sneakers squeaked against the floor, the only sound in the cavernous room until a low chuckle broke the silence. "If you dance, this tango will marry you," he smirked, leaning against the doorway. His name was Matteo, or so he'd introduced himself when he'd appeared an hour ago, claiming to be the estate's new owner. He was tall, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that glinted like the polished silverware Elena had scrubbed earlier. His suit was too pristine for this decaying place, and his voice carried an accent she couldn't place, a something old world, dripping with charm and mischief. He held a gramophone record in one hand, spinning it idly between his fingers. "Come on, Elena. One dance." "What's the harm?" She didn't look up from her mop. "I don't dance, and I don't marry strangers who show up in creepy old houses." Her voice was flat, but her heart gave a traitor's thud. There was something about him, something that made the air feel heavier, like a storm was brewing behind his smile. "Suit yourself," Matteo said, crossing the room with a stride too smooth for a man who'd been wandering a dusty mansion at midnight. He set the record on an ancient gramophone tucked in the corner, its brass horn tarnished but intact. "But this isn't just any tango. It's a promise." He wound the crank, and the needle scratched to life, releasing a melody that was both mournful and alive, a pulse of strings and accordion that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. Elena gripped her mop tighter, her knuckles whitening. She wasn't here for this. She was here to clean, to scrape by, to pay for her sister's hospital bills and keep the lights on in their cramped apartment. Men like Matteo, rich, cocky, with eyes that saw too much, didn't belong in her world. Yet the music curled around her, tugging at something buried deep, something she hadn't felt since she was a girl, twirling in her mother's kitchen to a radio's static hum. "Dance with me," he said again, closer now, his shadow falling across her mop bucket. "One tango. If you can keep up, I'll make you a queen." "If not a broken bar," he shrugged, his smirk widening. "You go back to your mop," she snorted, finally meeting his gaze. "You think I'm stupid? This some kind of game to you? Rich guy messing with the help?" His eyes softened, just for a moment, before the smirk returned. "Not a game, a wager. Dance with me, Elena, and see what happens." She should have told him to get lost, should have grabbed her bucket and walked out. But the music was relentless, weaving through her thoughts, loosening the knots in her shoulders. Her mother used to say tango was the language of souls, two bodies telling a story without words. Elena hadn't danced in years, not since her mother's death. Not since life became a grind of bills and exhaustion. But her feet twitched, betraying her, remembering steps she thought she'd forgotten. "Fine," she said, shoving the mop against the wall. "One dance. Then you leave me alone." Matteo's grin was triumphant, but there was something else in it, something hungry, like he'd been waiting for this moment longer than she could imagine. He extended a hand, and she took it, her calloused fingers rough against his smooth ones. The music swelled, and he pulled her into the frame of the tango, his grip firm but not forceful. Her body remembered before her mind did, a head high, shoulders back, feet ready to glide. The first step was tentative, her sneakers clumsy against the polished floor. But Matteo led with a confidence that made it impossible to falter. He moved like water, fluid and unyielding, guiding her through the echo, the forward and backward glide that felt like a conversation. Her muscles warmed, her breath quickened, and the room seemed to shrink, the dust and decay fading until it was just them, the music, and the rhythm of their steps. "You're better than I expected," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear as he dipped her low, her hair brushing the floor. "But can you keep up?" She didn't answer, just pushed back against his lead, her steps sharper now, matching his intensity. The tango was a duel. She remembered that Miyako, a push and pull, a challenge. She spun out of his arms, her footwork precise, and when he caught her again, his laughter was low and approving. "The she is," he said, like he'd known all along she had it in her. The music built, faster now, the accordion's wail cutting through the air. Elena's heart pounded, not just from the dance but from the way Matteo's eyes never left hers, like he was seeing something she didn't know was there. She matched him step for step, her body alive in a way it hadn't been in years. The room spun, the chandeliers blurring into streaks of light, and for a moment, she wasn't a cleaning lady with a bad back and a mountain of debt. She was fire, she was motion, she was free. The song ended abruptly, the needle scratching into silence. They froze, chest to chest, her breath ragged, his steady. His hand lingered on her waist, and she didn't pull away. "Not yet." "Well?" she said, voice hoarse. "What's the verdict, rich boy? Do I get the crown or the mop?" Matteo's smile was softer now, almost tender. "You danced like you were born for it," he said. "But the tango's not done with you yet." She stepped back, breaking the spell. "What's that supposed to mean?" He didn't answer, just gestured to the gramophone, where the record spun slowly, as if it had a mind of its own. "One more dance," he said. "Tomorrow night. Same time. If you come back, you'll see." "See what?" she snapped, but he was already walking away, his footsteps echoing in the empty ballroom. She stood there, alone with the mop and the fading echo of the music, her skin still tingling where his hand had been. The next day, Elena tried to forget the dance. She scrubbed floors at 2 other houses, picked up her sister's prescription, and ignored the ache in her legs that wasn't just from work. But the tango clung to her, the memory of Matteo's voice, his touch, the way the music had made her feel alive. She told herself it was nonsense, a rich man's whim, a moment of weakness. Yet when midnight came, she found herself back at the estate, her sneakers crunching on the gravel drive, her heart pounding with something dangerously close to anticipation. The ballroom was different tonight. The chandeliers glowed, their light warm and golden, as if someone had polished them. The air smelled of jasmine, not dust, and the gramophone was already playing, the same haunting tango filling the room. Matteo stood in the center, his suit darker now, his eyes brighter. "You came," he said, "and it wasn't a question." "I'm here to tell you to stop playing games," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. The music was already pulling at her, and her feet itched to move. "No games," he said, stepping closer. "Just the tango and the truth." She didn't ask what he meant. She didn't want to. Instead, she took his hand, and they danced again. This time, it was fiercer, wilder, the steps a battle and a surrender all at once. She felt the floor shift beneath her, the room blurring until it wasn't a room at all but a vast, endless space, stars overhead, the music a heartbeat that wasn't hers. Matteo's grip tightened, his eyes locked on hers, and she saw something in them, something ancient, something that wasn't entirely human. "You feel it, don't you?" he whispered as they spun. "The tango knows you. It always has." She wanted to laugh, to break the spell, but her body was no longer her own. The music was inside her, driving her steps, and when the song ended, she didn't stop. Neither did he. They danced into silence, into shadow, and when she finally pulled away, gasping, the ballroom was empty. No Matteo, no gramophone, just the faint scent of jasmine and the echo of her own heartbeat. Elena stumbled outside, the night air cold against her skin. The estate loomed behind her, its windows dark, as if no one had been there at all. But in her hand was a single rose, its petals black as ink, and etched into the stem were words she hadn't noticed before: "The tango never lies." She didn't go back to the estate after that. She told herself it was a dream, a trick of exhaustion and loneliness. But at night, when she closed her eyes, she heard the music, felt the weight of Matteo's hand, and wondered what truth she'd left behind on that ballroom floor. Elena never spoke of the tango, but it haunted her. Months passed, and she buried herself in work, in hospital visits, in the grind of survival. Yet the rose remained on her nightstand, its petals unyielding, its scent a faint reminder of that night. Her sister noticed the change in her, a spark in her eyes, a rhythm in her step that hadn't been there before. "You're different," her sister said one evening, her voice weak but curious. "Like you're waiting for something." Elena didn't answer. She wasn't waiting. She was running from the music, from the memory, from the impossible promise of a man who might not have been a man at all. But one night, as she walked home from a late shift, the air grew heavy with jasmine, and a familiar melody drifted from an alleyway. Her heart stopped. She turned, and there was Matteo, leaning against a lamppost, the gramophone at his feet. "You didn't come back," he said, his smirk softer now, almost sad. "But the tango isn't done with you." She wanted to run, to scream, to demand answers. Instead, she stepped forward, her sneakers silent on the pavement. "What are you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. He tilted his head, the moonlight catching his eyes, and for a moment, she saw a dark flicker of something vast, something eternal. "I'm the one who keeps the tango's promise," he said. "And you, Elena, danced like you were born to claim it." The music started again, unbidden, and before she could stop herself, she was in his arms, the alleyway dissolving into starlight. They danced, and this time, she didn't fight it. She let the tango take her, let it tell its truth. When the music stopped, she was alone, but the rose on her nightstand was gone, replaced by a ring of black petals, warm to the touch. Elena never saw Matteo again. But sometimes, in the quiet of her apartment, she'd hear the faint strains of a tango, and she'd smile, knowing she'd danced with something bigger than herself and won. The ballroom was a husk of its former glory, its gilded walls peeling like sunburnt skin, the chandeliers dangling precariously, their crystals catching the faint moonlight in jagged glints. Dust motes swirled in the air, stirred by Elena's broom as she swept the warped oak floor. She was a shadow in this decaying estate, her faded jeans and worn sneakers a stark contrast to the grandeur that lingered in the room's bones. At 32, Elena's life was a rhythm of survival, cleaning houses, paying for her sister's medical bills, and dodging dreams that had no place in her reality. The tango, her mother's old obsession, was a memory she'd buried long ago, along with the woman who'd taught her its steps. Tonight, though, the air felt different, charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. A low chuckle broke the silence. "If you dance, this tango will marry you," he smirked, lounging against the doorframe. He called himself Matteo, the supposed new owner of this crumbling mansion, though Elena wasn't sure she believed him. His suit was too sharp, his dark hair too perfectly tousled, and his eyes green as jade, glinting with something unsettling, watched her like she was more than just the help. He held an old vinyl record, spinning it between his fingers like a coin. "What do you say, Elena? One dance. It'll change your life," she snorted, pushing the broom harder against the floor. "I don't dance, and I don't play games with rich guys who think they can buy a thrill." Her voice was steady, but her pulse betrayed her, quickening at the way his smirk widened, like he knew something she didn't. "Suit yourself," Matteo said, crossing the room with a grace that didn't belong in a place this broken. He set the record on a dusty gramophone in the corner, its brass horn tarnished but gleaming faintly in the dim light. "But this tango isn't just a dance. It's a promise." He cranked the handle, and the needle scratched to life, releasing a melody that was equal parts longing and fire, strings and accordion weaving a spell that made the air hum. Elena gripped her broom, her knuckles pale. She should have ignored him, finished her work, and left. She had no time for this, no patience for men who thought charm could unravel her. But the music tugged at her, stirring memories of her mother's kitchen, of spinning in bare feet to a crackling radio, her mother's laughter guiding her through the tango's steps. It had been years since she danced, since life had ground her dreams to dust. Yet her body remembered, her hips swaying slightly, her feet itching to move. "Come on," Matteo said, closer now, his voice low and coaxing. "One dance. If you can match me, I'll give you more than you can imagine." If not a broken bar, he shrugged, his eyes dancing with challenge. "You go back to your broom." She glared at him, her pride bristling. "You think I'm that easy? Some fairy tale nonsense about dancing my way to a crown?" "Not a fairy tale," he said, his tone suddenly serious. "A wager. Dance with me, Elena, and see." She should have walked out, should have told him to shove his wager and his smirk. But the music was relentless, curling around her like smoke, loosening the weight of years spent surviving. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, "The tango is truth, Mija. It shows who you are." Elena set the broom against the wall, her hands trembling not with fear, but with something she hadn't felt in years. Defiance. Desire. Life. "Fine," she said, stepping forward. "One dance. Then you leave me alone." Matteo's grin was electric, but there was something deeper in his eyes, something that made her stomach twist. He offered his hand, and she took it, her calloused fingers rough against his smooth ones. The music swelled, and he pulled her into the tango's frame, chest high, shoulders back, their bodies close but not touching, a space charged with tension. Her first steps were stiff, her sneakers clumsy on the polished floor, but Matteo led with a certainty that left no room for doubt. He moved like he was born to it, each step a command, each turn a question. Her body caught up before her mind did. The tango's rhythm sank into her bones, and she matched him, her steps growing bolder, her hips swaying with the music's pulse. The ocho, the cross, the glide. She remembered it all, her mother's lessons flooding back. The room seemed to fade, the dust and decay blurring until it was just them, the music, and the story their bodies told. Matteo's hand tightened on her waist, guiding her through a dip that left her breathless, her hair brushing the floor. "Not bad," he murmured, his breath warm against her cheek. "But can you keep up?" She didn't answer, just pushed back against his lead, her steps sharp and deliberate. The tango was a duel, a conversation of power and surrender, and she wasn't here to lose. She spun out of his arms, her footwork precise, and when he pulled her back, his laughter was low and rich, like he'd been waiting for her to fight. The music quickened, the accordion's wail cutting through the air, and Elena felt something ignite inside her. She wasn't just dancing, as she was alive, her body singing with a freedom she'd forgotten. The song ended abruptly, the needle scratching into silence. They froze, chest to chest, her breath ragged, his steady. His hand lingered on her waist, and she didn't pull away. "Not yet." "Well?" she said, her voice rough. "Do I pass your little test?" Matteo's smile was softer now, almost reverent. "You danced like you were made for it," he said. "But the tango's not done with you." She stepped back, breaking the spell. "What's that supposed to mean?" He didn't answer, just gestured to the gramophone, where the record spun slowly, as if it had a will of its own. "Come back tomorrow night," he said. "One more dance. Then you'll know." "Know what?" she demanded, but he was already gone, his footsteps fading into the dark. She stood alone in the ballroom, the air heavy with the scent of dust and something sweeter, like jasmine. Her skin still burned where his hand had been, and the music echoed in her mind, refusing to let her go. Elena tried to shake the night off, but it clung to her like damp clothes. The next day, she scrubbed floors at a corporate office and a suburban McMansion, her hands raw from bleach, her mind replaying the tango's steps. She told herself it was nothing, a rich man's game, a moment of weakness. She wasn't some starry-eyed girl chasing fairy tales. She was practical, grounded, a woman who knew life didn't hand out miracles. Yet when she closed her eyes, she saw Matteo's smirk, felt the rhythm of his lead, and her feet twitched with the memory of the dance. Her sister, Anna, noticed the change. "You're humming," Anna said from her hospital bed, her voice weak but sharp with curiosity. "And you're a broken bar lighter, like you used to be." Elena brushed it off, adjusting Anna's pillow, but her sister's words stuck. Lighter. She hadn't felt light in years, not since their mother died, not since the weight of bills and illness had crushed her dreams. Still, She didn't go back to the estate that night or the next. She told herself she was done, that Matteo was a trickster, that the tango was just a dance. But on the third night, she couldn't stay away. The estate loomed under a moonless sky, its windows dark, its silence oppressive. She told herself she was there to confront him, to demand answers, but her heart knew better. The ballroom was different when she stepped in, city alive, somehow, the chandeliers glowing with a warmth that shouldn't have been possible, the air thick with jasmine. The gramophone was already playing, the tango's melody curling through the room like a lover's whisper. Matteo stood in the center, his suit black as midnight, his eyes brighter than the chandeliers. "You came," he said, and it wasn't a question. His voice held a weight now, a gravity that made her skin prickle. "I'm here to tell you to stop," she said, but her words felt hollow. The music was already pulling at her, and her body wanted to move. "No," he said, stepping closer. "You're here because you felt it. The truth in the tango, the promise." She clenched her fists, fighting the urge to step into his arms. "What are you? Some kind of ghost? A conman? What's the game, Matteo?" He tilted his head, the light catching his eyes, and for a moment, she saw something impossibly, a flicker of stars, a depth that stretched beyond the room, beyond time. "I'm the keeper of the tango's promise," he said. "And you, Elena, danced like you were born to claim it." Her breath caught. She wanted to laugh, to call him crazy, but the music was inside her now, a pulse that matched her heartbeat. "What's the promise?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Dance with me," he said, offering his hand. "And you'll see." She shouldn't have taken it. She should have turned and run, back to her safe, small life. But her hand found his, and they were dancing before she could think. This tango was different, fiercer, wilder, the steps a storm of passion and defiance. The room blurred, the chandeliers spinning into streaks of gold, and the floor seemed to fall away, leaving them dancing on air, on starlight, on something that wasn't real but felt truer than anything she'd ever known. Matteo's grip was unyielding, his eyes locked on hers, and she saw it again, that vast, eternal something in his gaze. "You feel it?" he said, his voice low and urgent. "The tango knows you. It always has." Her body moved without thought, her steps perfect, her heart racing. The music was a living thing, weaving their story, her pain, her strength, her buried dreams. She pushed against his lead, challenging him, and he met her with a fire that made her feel invincible. The world dissolved, and it was just them, the tango, and a truth she couldn't name but could feel in her bones. "Who are you?" she gasped as they spun, her voice lost in the music's wail. "I'm the one who sees you," he said, his hand tightening on her waist. "The one who knows what you could be." The music crescendoed, and they danced faster, their steps a blur, their bodies a single flame. She saw flashes of her mother's smile, Anna's laughter, a life where she wasn't bound by debt and duty. The tango was showing her something, promising her something, and she wanted it so badly it hurt. But there was a cost. She felt it in Matteo's grip, in the weight of his gaze. This wasn't just a dance, it was a choice. The song ended, and they froze, her chest heaving, his breath steady. The room snapped back into focus, the chandeliers dimming, the jasmine fading. His hand lingered on her cheek, his touch warm and impossibly real. "You danced like a queen," he said. "But the tango asks for everything. Will you give it?" She stepped back, her heart pounding. "What does that mean? What do you want?" He smiled, but it was sad now, almost regretful. "Not me. The tango. It wants your truth, your fire, your life." She stared at him, the air heavy between them. "And if I say no?" "Then you go back," he said simply, "to your broom, your bills, your small, safe world." "But you'll always hear the music." She wanted to scream, to demand clarity, but the gramophone was silent, and Matteo was fading, his form dissolving into shadow. "Wait," she called, but he was gone, leaving only the echo of the tango and a single black rose on the floor, its petals warm to the touch. Elena didn't return to the estate. She went back to her life, to Anna, to the grind. But the rose sat on her nightstand, It sent a constant reminder. She heard the tango in her dreams, felt Matteo's hand in her sleep. Months later, Anna was released from the hospital, and Elena found a better job, one that let her breathe a little easier. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, she'd hum the tango's melody, and her feet would move, tracing steps she'd never forget. One night, walking home under a starlit sky, she heard the faint strains of an accordion, the pulse of a dance that knew her name. She stopped, her heart racing, and saw a shadow in an alley, a man with jade green eyes and a smirk. He didn't speak, just held out his hand. Elena hesitated, the roses scent faint in her memory, the tango's promise heavy in her chest. Then she turned away, her steps steady, her head high. She danced with truth, and that was enough. The ballroom was a ghost of opulence, its marble floors scuffed and dulled, its velvet curtains moth-eaten and sagging. Moonlight spilled through a cracked skylight, painting the room in silvers and shadows, illuminating dust that danced like specters in the stale air. Elena pushed her mop across the floor, her movements mechanical, her mind numbed by the monotony of cleaning houses for people who never saw her. At 34, she was a woman forged in necessity, her hands rough from years of scrubbing, her dreams buried under the weight of her brother's medical debts. The tango, once her passion, was a distant memory, something her father used to teach her in their cramped living room, his laughter as warm as the music. Now, it was just her, the mop, and the silence of this decaying estate. A voice cut through the quiet, smooth and teasing. "If you dance, this tango will marry you," he smirked, leaning against a fluted column. He called himself Julian, claiming to be the estate's new owner, though his tailored coat and polished boots seemed out of place in this ruin. His dark eyes sparkled with mischief, his hair a cascade of black curls, and his smile carried a challenge that made Elena's skin prickle. He held an old vinyl record, its edges worn but its surface gleaming, as if it had been waiting for this moment. She didn't pause her mopping. "I don't dance," she said, her voice flat. "And I don't have time for your games." Her eyes stayed on the floor, but she felt his gaze, heavy and unyielding, like he could see through her worn sweat to the girl she used to be. "Pity," Julian said, strolling toward a gramophone half hidden in the shadows, its brass horn catching the moonlight. "This tango isn't just a dance. It's a vow." He placed the record on the turntable, cranked the handle, and the needle hissed to life. A melody unfolded, slow, sultry, a weave of guitar and bandoneon that seemed to pulse through the floor, stirring the dust into a faint shimmer. Elena's grip tightened on the mop handle. She should have ignored him, finished her work, and left. She had a double shift tomorrow, a hospital bill due next week. But the music was a siren's call, tugging at memories of her father's hands guiding her through the tango's steps, his voice whispering, "Feel the soul of it, Elena." Her feet twitched, betraying her, and she cursed under her breath. She wasn't that girl anymore. Life had made sure of that. "Dance with me," Julian said, closer now, his voice low and inviting. He stood just beyond her mop bucket, his hand extended, palm up. "One dance. If you can match me, I'll give you something worth more than this place." "If not a broken bar," he shrugged, his smirk widening. "You keep cleaning." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "What, you think I'm gonna fall for some rich boy's fairy tale? You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said, his eyes narrowing, like he saw something she didn't. "I know you hear the music. I know you feel it." She wanted to tell him to get lost, but the tango's rhythm was relentless, seeping into her bones, loosening the knots of exhaustion. Her father had called the tango a truth-teller, a dance that stripped away pretense. She hadn't danced since he died, since the world became a ledger of debts and duties. But her body remembered, her hips swaying slightly, her shoulders straightening. "Fine," she said, slamming the mop against the wall. "One dance. Then you're gone." Julian's smile was triumphant, but there was a flicker of something else, something ancient, something hungry. He took her hand, his touch warm and sure, and pulled her into the tango's frame. Her sneakers squeaked on the marble, but his lead was flawless, guiding her into the first step. The music swelled, and she moved with him, hesitant at first, her body stiff from years of disuse. But the tango was patient, and Julian was relentless. His steps a challenge she couldn't ignore. They glided through the echo, the forward and backward sway, their bodies close but not touching, a space alive with tension. Elena's muscles warmed, her breath quickened, and the room seemed to shrink, the decay fading until it was just them and the music. She matched his steps, her footwork growing sharper, her confidence building. Julian spun her, his hand firm on her waist, and dipped her low, her hair brushing the floor. "Not bad," he murmured, his breath against her ear. "But can you keep up?" She didn't answer, just pushed back against his lead, her steps bold now, a defiance she hadn't felt in years. The tango was a conversation, a duel, and she wasn't here to lose. She spun out of his arms, her movements precise, and when he caught her again, his laughter was low and approving. The music surged, the bandoneon's wail filling the air, and Elena felt alive, her body aflame, her heart pounding with something she thought she'd lost. The song ended, the needle scratching into silence. They froze, chest to chest, her breath ragged, his steady. His hand lingered on her back, and she didn't pull away. "Not yet." "Well?" she said, her voice rough. "What's the prize, Julian? Or was this just a game?" His smile softened, almost tender. "You danced like you were born for it," he said. "But the tango's not done with you. Come back tomorrow night. One more dance." She stepped back, breaking the spell. "And if I don't?" He didn't answer, just pointed to the gramophone, where the record spun slowly, as if it had a mind of its own. "You'll want to know," he said, then turned and vanished into the shadows, his footsteps silent. Elena stood alone, the air heavy with the scent of dust and something sweeter, like roses. Her skin tingled where his hand had been, and the music echoed in her mind, a promise she couldn't shake. Elena tried to bury the night in routine. She scrubbed floors at a law firm, picked up her brother's prescription, and ignored the ache in her legs that wasn't just from work. The tango clung to her, a melody that hummed in her veins, a memory of Julian's eyes, sharp and knowing, like he'd seen every crack in her armor. She told herself it was nonsense, a rich man's whim, a moment of madness. She wasn't a dancer anymore, she was a survivor, practical and grounded. But at night, when she closed her eyes, she felt the rhythm of his lead, the heat of his touch, and her feet traced steps on the edge of sleep. Her brother, Marco, noticed the change. "You're different," he said from his wheelchair, his voice weak but curious, his eyes searching hers over a cup of tea. "Like you're carrying something new." She brushed it off, adjusting his blanket, but his words lingered. Carrying something. She felt it, a spark, a weight, a question she couldn't answer. She didn't go back to the estate the next night, or the night after. She told herself she was done, that Julian was a trickster, that the tango was just a dance. But on the fourth night, the pull was too strong. She found herself standing outside the estate, the air thick with the scent of roses, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. The ballroom was transformed. The chandeliers glowed with a golden light, their crystals sparkling as if newly polished. The air was warm, heavy with the fragrance of roses, and the gramophone was already playing, the tango's melody weaving through the room like a living thing. Julian stood in the center, his coat darker now, his eyes brighter, like emeralds catching fire. "You came," he said, his voice low and certain, as if he'd never doubted her return. "I'm here to end this," she said, but her words lacked conviction. The music was already inside her, urging her to move, and her body wanted to answer. "No," Julian said, stepping closer, his presence filling the room. "You're here because you felt it. The tango's truth. The vow it made." She clenched her fists, fighting the pull of his words. "What are you, Julian? Some kind of ghost? A liar? What's the point of this?" He tilted his head, the light catching his eyes, and for a moment, she saw something impossibly, a glimpse of eternity, a vastness that stretched beyond the ballroom, beyond her understanding. "I'm the one who keeps the tango's vow. he said. And you, Elena, danced like you were meant to claim it. Her breath caught, her mind racing. Claim what? What's the vow? Dance with me, he said, offering his hand. And you'll know. She shouldn't have taken it. She should have turned and run, back to her safe, small life, to Marco, to the certainty of struggle. But the music was a tide, pulling her under, and her hand found his, warm and unyielding. They fell into the tango, and this time, it was different, a wilder, fiercer, a storm of steps that felt like a battle and a surrender all at once. The room blurred, the chandeliers spinning into streaks of light, and the floor seemed to dissolve, leaving them dancing on a plane of stars, the music a heartbeat that wasn't entirely hers. Julian's grip was firm, his eyes locked on hers, and she saw it again, that vast, ancient something in his gaze, like he was more than a man, more than this moment. You feel it, he said, his voice urgent, almost pleading. The tango knows you. It's always known you. Her body moved without thought, her steps perfect, her heart a drumbeat matching the music. The tango was telling her story, her grief, her strength, her buried dreams of a life unbound. She pushed against his lead, challenging him, and he met her with a fire that made her feel invincible. The world fell away, and it was just them, the music, and a truth she could almost grasp. She saw flashes of her father's smile, Marco's laughter, a version of herself who wasn't bowed by debt and duty. The tango was offering her something, a promise of freedom, of power, but it came with a shadow, a cost she could feel in Julian's touch. Who are you? She gasped as they spun, her voice swallowed by the bandoneon's wail. What do you want from me? I'm the one who sees you, he said, his hand tightening on her waist. The one who knows what you could become. The music surged, and they danced faster, their steps a blur, their bodies a single flame. Elena felt the tango's truth burning through here, a life where she could be more than a cleaning lady, more than a sister drowning in bills. But there was a price, a weight in Julian's eyes that spoke of sacrifice, of giving herself to something bigger, something eternal. The room spun, the stars beneath their feet pulsing with the music's rhythm, and she saw herself reflected in his gaze, not the tired woman she knew, but a queen, a fire, a force. The song reached its peak, and Julian dipped her low, his face inches from hers, his breath warm on her lips. The tango asks for everything, he whispered. Your heart, your soul, your truth. Will you give it? Her chest heaved, her mind reeling. She saw the choice, her life as it was, heavy but known, or the unknown promise of the tango, vast and terrifying. What happens if I say yes? She asked, her voice trembling. You become what you were meant to be, he said. But you leave this world behind. And if I say no? His smile was sad, almost human. You go back. But the music will never leave you. The song ended, the needle scratching into silence. They froze, her body pressed against his, the air thick with roses and possibility. The ballroom snapped back into focus, the chandeliers dimming, the stars fading. Julian's hand lingered on her cheek, his touch a question she couldn't answer. Choose, Elena, he said, and then he was gone, dissolving into shadow, leaving only a black rose on the floor, its petals warm and soft. Elena stood there, her breath ragged, the rose in her hand. She didn't go back to the estate. She returned to her life here, Marco, the hospital, the endless work. But the rose sat on her bedside table, its scent a reminder of the tango's vow. Months later, Marco's health improved, and Elena found a job that paid better, easing the weight on her shoulders. But at night, she'd hear the tango's melody, faint and persistent, and her feet would move, tracing steps she'd never forget.